He broke a teenager's arm on live TV and laughed. He didn't know a legend was in the front row. In California U-Mobile Arena, a silver-haired guy in a simple button-down was seconds away from being heckled on live TV. A simple championship party became explosive when UFC phenom Tyreek, Ghost Maddox, seized the mic and goaded Chuck Norris with a grin. "I'll knock you out, Grandpa." Chuck Norris was not some celebrity guest. For more than 60 years, he was a world champion martial artist, an elite Air Force veteran, and the man who trained presidents renowned globally for never having to lift his voice to quiet a room. When Tick challenged him to fight him in public, he had no notion he was provoking a tempest. Chuck took up the challenge and replied with discipline, patience, and proficiency that would break Tyreek's conceit and spark a worldwide discussion. What started out as a clout-chasing prank would turn into a contemporary fable. A cocky champion and the fight world would never be the same once Chuck Norris demonstrated the value of respect in the only way the young man knew how: combat. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're listening from. And if this episode makes you feel something, do be sure to be subscribed because tomorrow I have something extra special in store for you. A vicious punch resonated through the arena as the fighter slumped to the mat. The crowd held its breath as the referee jumped in, seeing if the man even had movement. But the victor was already showing off. With arms raised high, smiles stretched wide, the U-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas throbbed with raw power. All seats taken, all voices merging into a deafening din that reverberated off walls. Floodlights shone down on the highly polished octagon at center stage. Cameras flashed like lightning as fans bellowed from all directions. Some waved banners. Others sat forward on the end of their seats, staring intently at the fighters. Amidst this pandemonium sat Chuck Norris, unruffled and serene ringside in the VIP area. Wearing a plain button-down shirt and black jeans, he didn't budge. No entourage, no seeking to be noticed, and yet gazes instinctively drifted toward him. He sat firm and easy, one hand loosely on his knee, the other at his side. No smile, no applause, only concentration. His weathered face, now edged with silver hair, wore the tranquil dignity of a man who had nothing left to prove. Next to him was Eleanor Norris, his granddaughter. Her military-trained posture reflected in his own. Dark hair drawn tightly back, eyes sharp and evaluating. She inched closer to him. "You still want to hang around for the main event?" she said. "These men are getting more raucous." Chuck only nodded. "I took the invite. I'll ride it out." All eyes within the octagon, though, were on one man, Tick, the Spectre Maddox. The undefeated upstart, not only for his prowess, but for the manner in which he achieved it. Arrogant, flashy, merciless. He lived for the spectacle, existed to master not just his opponent, but the audience. Every gesture he made appeared designed to elicit a response. He bounced up and down on his heels, eyeing the cameras, drinking in the attention. Fans hated him or loved him, but no one overlooked him. Tick loomed over his defeated adversary, an aging warrior in the form of Diego Santos, lying motionless on the mat. The referee pushed Tick away, medics swarming in. Diego's eyes opened and closed feebly, but it was too late. "Another one down!" Tick cried, pacing around the octagon. "Who's next? Who's got the balls to step to the ghost?" Dana Reyes at ringside fiddled with her headset. A fighter herself, she understood the difference between confidence and arrogance. And Tyreek, the Phantom Maddox, is still undefeated. Ladies and gentlemen, 15 consecutive victories, 12 of them knockouts. But I must criticize that post-fight spectacle for lacking something, her co-commentator agreed. He has the talent, no question. But that showboating on Santos, that is not champion quality. Dana's expression turned skeptical. And if you glance over in the VIP section, you'll see a legend here tonight. Chuck Norris, the most legendary martial artist of all time, observing this new era, wondering what he's thinking at this moment. The camera cut back to Chuck, and he kept his stoic face. In the octagon, Tick took the microphone from the announcer, sweat-drenched face, chest rising and falling with adrenaline. "You all seeing this?" he yelled. "This is what a real champion looks like. Not these has-beens they keep sending my way." Tommy Steele Kavanaugh, Tyrik's trainer, moved toward the cage door, a mix of pride and concern on his weathered face. "Easy, kid," he muttered. "You won. That's enough." But Tick wasn't listening. His eyes had found Chuck Norris in the crowd. A new hunger flashed across his fascinate for victory, but for something more. Legacy, validation. His gaze locked onto the legend. "Well, look who we got here." Tick's voice boomed through the speakers. Chuck Norris himself. The man. The myth. His tone shifted, dripping with mockery. The senior citizen. A hush fell over sections of the crowd. Dana Reyes leaned forward in the commentary booth. "Oh, he's not going there. Tell me he's not going." "There." Elena's body tensed beside Chuck. "He's talking to you," she whispered. Chuck's expression remained unchanged. "You know, I grew up watching your movies, old man," Tick continued, pacing the cage like a predator. "All that spinning kick stuff cute for its time. But this," he gestured around the octagon. "This is real fighting, not choreographed Hollywood BS." Cameras swung between Tick and Chuck. The arena's energy shifted, uncomfortable murmurs spreading through the crowd. "So I'm thinking," Tyrik's voice grew louder, feeding off the tension. "Why don't you come in here and show us if any of that legend status is real? Or are you just another old guy living off past glory?" Gasps rippled through the audience. Some fans booed, others cheered, thrilled by the audacity. Elena half rose from her seat, but Chuck placed a hand gently on her arm. Dana Reyes's voice cut through the broadcast. "What we're witnessing is unprecedented disrespect. Chuck Norris isn't just a movie star. He's a legitimate former world champion, a pioneer in American martial arts, and one of the most respected figures in combat sports. In the octagon, Tick wouldn't let up. What's wrong, Grandpa? Too scared to stand up? Worried about breaking a hip?" He laughed, playing to the cameras. "Come on, the offer's open. I'll even go easy on you." "Maybe." Tommy Kavanaugh shook his head from outside the cage. "Enough, Tick. That's Chuck Norris. For Christ's sake." But Tick was in too deep. "You used to be a legend," he shouted directly at Chuck. "Now you're just old." The crowd erupted, some in outrage, others in wild excitement. Social media was already exploding with clips of the confrontation. Security staff shifted nervously, looking between Tick and Chuck. Through it all, Chuck Norris remained perfectly still. His expression neither angry nor intimidated, just watchful, assessing. The silence from him seemed to amplify Tick's words, making them sound hollow in the vast arena. Elena leaned close to her grandfather. "You don't have to take this," she whispered. "We can leave." Chuck's eyes never wavered from Turk. "No," he murmured. "Some things have to be heard." Dana Reyes spoke softly into her microphone. "And that's why he's Chuck Norris. Total control even when goaded. The question is, will he answer this challenge? And if he does, what will that answer be?" Tick finally threw the microphone down and raised his arms, basking in the mixed reception from the audience. As he walked out of the cage, he jabbed his finger right at Chuck. "Think about it, old-timer. One round with me. Show the world what's left in that tank." As Tyrik went storming off down the tunnel, the arena was abuzz with speculation. Chuck Norris stood slowly, smoothed his jacket, and with Elena by his side, made his quiet departure. He acknowledged no cameras, answered no questions, but something had been initiated, something that went beyond the sport itself. It wasn't just a challenge. It was a crash of aerosoft values, and everyone knew Chuck Norris's silence wouldn't be the end of it. It was only the beginning. Chuck Norris's SUV drove away from the U-Mobile arena. the neon sheen of the Las Vegas Strip etching, streaks across its windows. Within, Elena held the steering wheel, her knuckles clenched white with tension that her grandfather didn't appear to share. "That was absolutely out of line," she said, checking the rear-view mirror as if Tick's words might literally follow. "Them. You're a guest of honor, and he treats you like that. Someone ought to educate that child some respect." Chuck stared out the window, his reflection ghosted against the casino lights. "Everyone does something," he said softly. "Some do. Respect. Some do why it's needed." Elena looked at him. "You're not actually thinking about his challenge." Chuck didn't respond. "What did you see in there, Elena? When he was calling you out?" She scowled. "I saw an arrogant fighter drunk on his own hype. Look beyond." Elena paused, thinking back on Tick's posture, his faces between the insults. "Insecurity," she finally said. "He was practically begging for your attention. Approval from someone he says doesn't matter." Chuck nodded. "And that's why this isn't just about a fight." By morning, the confrontation had exploded online. Every sports network played the clip on repeat. Tyreek's swagger, his raised finger. The insults in Chuck's stone-faced quiet. Social media burst with takes, memes, and predictions. In a downtown hotel suite, Tick scrolled through his phone, grinning at the headlines. "We're trending globally, Tommy. Globally." He tossed his phone onto the couch and shadowboxed around the room, sending fast combinations at imaginary foes. Tommy Cavanaugh sat heavy in an armchair, looking less enthused. "You picked a fight with Chuck Norris. Do you even know who that man is?" Tyreek laughed. "Some actor near 80 who made a career out of roundhouse kicks and terrible onliners. Before he was an actor, he was a 6-time world karate champion. Before that, he was in the Air Force. He's taught President's kid. He doesn't have fans." "Has disciples has," Tick corrected, still bobbing on his toes. "Had disciples, had championships, past tense." "Tommy." "This is my time now." Tommy rose, his creased face etched with worry. "This isn't about skill or age. You're misunderstanding entirely. The point is exposure," Tick argued. "Every brand on the planet is blowing up my agent's phone. The UFC can't buy this kind of press." His phone vibrated with a call. Tick picked up, putting it on speaker. "Maddox, turn on ESPN2. His agent's voice crackled. "Dana Reyes' show now." Tommy snatched the remote and clicked to the channel. Dana. Reyes sat behind a desk, footage of last night's confrontation playing on a screen behind her. What we witnessed goes beyond simple trash talk. Dana was saying, "This represents a fundamental clash of eras. On the one hand, there's Tick Maddox, undoubtedly gifted, but with today's social media brawlers look-at-me attitude. On the other, Chuck Norris, a man who never had to tell you how good he was. You knew." The camera zoomed in closer on Dana, but this is what's intriguing about Chuck's reaction last night. Silence. Dead silence. No response. No anger evident. In a time when everyone wants to clap back immediately, Chuck showed us something that we don't see very often anymore: the self-control to wait for his time. Tyreek snorted, or he was intimidated, lost for words. Tommy quieted him down. "Inner sources of Chuck Norris informed me that he never commented on the situation publicly," Dana went on. "But the question remains, will he take the challenge up? And should he? Chuck is 80, well ahead of the competition. Tick is 28, and a champion in the prime of his physical health." Dana leaned in toward the camera. "But anyone writing off Chuck on the basis of age alone has overlooked something significant. Legends are not constructed of mere muscle and reaction. They are constructed of something much stronger." The piece cut to a montage of Chuck's career tournament wins, film clips, training scenes through decades. When it came back to Dana, her face was stern. "Respect cannot be demanded. It has to be earned. Some earn it with boisterous triumphs, some with silent dignity. Last night provided both styles in tandem. Which one is truly strength? That is the true question here. Tick switched off the TV. Philosophical trash. Strength is strength. I knock guys out. That's the bottom line. Tommy shook his head. Kid, you're listening but not hearing. This ain't about beating Chuck up. It's all about that, Tyrick cut in. And the whole world's going to be watching it happen. His phone rang once more. The president of UFC, Tyreek answered with a smile. Tell me you're booking it. That afternoon, in a small private gym, 30 miles outside the Strip, Chuck worked through a series of exact forms. He moved slowly, economically, no flash from his movie career, only the essential technique that had come first. Elena sat on a bench, a bottle of water held loosely in her hand. The UFC called again, she said. They're presenting a modified exhibition match, 3 rounds, limited contact, full safety measures. Chuck finished his form before he could answer. What else? Pay-per-view figures they've never seen before? Full medical staff on standby? They're presenting it as the legend versus the ghost. Respect at stake, Chuck wiped off his face. And they think that is okay, Granddad. You don't have to do this. No one asks you to fight a champion younger than half your age. Walk away with dignity. Chuck glanced at her, something crossing his eyes. Is that dignity to you? Walking away? You don't need to prove anything. This isn't proving anything to anybody else. Then what is it about then? What is it? Chuck grabbed his water bottle. Certain lessons have to be learned in a language which is understood by both parties. Elena watched him. You're actually thinking about it. I'm not thinking about it, Chuck whispered. I've already said yes. Elena's eyes went wide. What? When? This morning. I phoned them myself. Why didn't you say something to me? Chuck put a hand on her shoulder. Because you would have tried to prevent me. And some things need to happen even when those who care about us don't understand why. That evening, the announcement broke across all media platforms. Chuck Norris would face Tick the Ghost Maddox in a special exhibition match. 3 weeks from today, at the same venue where the challenge had been issued. The press conference was scheduled for the following day. In his hotel room, Tick observed the news with a smug smile. Did I call it or what? He told Tommy. The old man bit. Tommy wasn't as gung-ho. You ought to view some of his previous battles. Learn his style. Tick dismissed him. I don't have to learn from the past. I create it. Pride goes before a fall, kid. Spare the fortune cookies. We both know the way this goes in, me standing over another knockout, building a legend into my highlight reel. Tommy stared at him for a long time. You know what frightens me? I think you really believe that. At a quiet dinner across town with Elena and Doc Henry Bautista, the veteran ringside doctor who had known Chuck for decades, the tone of conversation changed. Physically, you're in great shape for a guy your age, Doc Henry continued, slicing into his steak. But that does not alter the underlying risk factors. Reaction time, bone density, ability to recover, they all are in favor of youth. I know the physiology, Henry. So why accept? You have nothing further to prove. Your place in history is assured. Chuck laid down his fork. This isn't about my place in history. It's about his future. Elena shared a look with Doc Henry. What are you saying? Tick has all the ability in the world, but he lacks what counts most. He battles for himself, for applause, for notice. He hasn't learned that real strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about controlling yourself. And you think getting in the octagon with him will show him that? Elena questioned. I believe he's got to see it firsthand, Chuck answered. There are lessons you can only learn through the experience. Doc Henry pushed forward. Chuck, with all respect, what is your strategy here? You can't keep up with him speed for speed or strength for strength. A small smile flickered across Chuck's face. Who says I do have to? The following morning, The UFC Las Vegas headquarters was the location of the official press conference. The room was filled with reporters, cameras, and a buzz that seemed more suited to a title fight rather than an exhibition. Turk was first to arrive, clad in a flashy designer suit, entourage in attendance. Turk posed for the cameras, shadowboxing photographers, signing autographs in dramatic gestures. Chuck arrived minutes later by himself, except for Elena with a plain black jacket over a button-down shirt. No entrance music, no fanfare. He sat down at the table, nodded to the UFC president, and clasped his hands together before him. The difference couldn't have been greater. As the press conference got underway, Tick controlled the microphone, responding to questions with well-rehearsed sound bites and periodic zingers at Chuck's expense. "Look, I admire what he did in his day," Tick said with a smile that undermined his assertion. "But this is 2025, not 1975. The game's changed. I'm just doing the fans a favor and giving them an opportunity to find out if the legend is true or if it's just hype." When questioned about his plan, Tick visibly flexed under his suit jacket. "I've got one plan. Put him to sleep." Respectfully, "Of course," winked at the cameras. Through it all, Chuck kept his cool, responding to questions straight but brief. When asked at last why he accepted the challenge, he leaned forward slightly into the microphone. "There's a difference between hearing and listening," he said calmly. "Between seeing and understanding. Between fighting and knowing why you fight?" a reporter shot back. "Don't you worry about the age gap, about getting hurt?" Chuck answered with simplicity. "Pain is temporary. Lessons last forever." Tick rolled his eyes. "More fortune cookie philosophy. Save it for the films, old geezer. In real life, the only language that speaks is this." He raised a clenched fist. Chuck shot him straight, in the eye for the first time. "That's where you're mistaken," he spoke quietly. "And that's why we're having this discussion. To tell and prepare this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now, back to the story. While the press conference came to a close, the two men stood for the traditional face-off photo. Tyreek loomed above Chuck, glaring down with unbridled confidence. Chuck returned his look steadily, without winking, without posturing. Something flashed across Tick's fascia, fleeting uncertainty, speedily covered by another cocky grin. He moved in close. 3 weeks, Grandpa. Better get your act together." Chuck's face never changed. 3 weeks? He agreed. Just in time. For what? Tick asked. "For you to determine what's important." Tick dismissed it, but as they exited the stage, Dana Reyes pointed out what the camera might have caught. Tick glanced back at Chuck 3 times. Chuck never once glanced back. The lines were drawn. The countdown had started, and the silence echo was set to shatter. The Nevada desert was washed in the light of dawn, coloring rock formations amber and gold. 20 mi from Las Vegas, away from neon and din, a lone figure traversed exact shapes in the chill morning air. Chuck Norris took deep breaths, his movements in deliberate cadence. No crowd, no cameras, only the discipline that had structured his life for more than 60 years. Every position, every movement betrayed years of fine-tuning. Nothing excessive, nothing to impress. The little training gym was owned by an old acquaintance, private, hidden away, analog in a digital age. Bare bones equipment, scuffed. Mats, walls covered in yellowed photos of fighters from another time. No sponsors, no logos, only intent. Elena appeared as Chuck was completing his warm-up, toting a duffel bag and 2 coffees. "You're out early," she said, offering him a cup. "Old habit," Chuck said, taking a sip. "Your grandmother used to say, 'I was on military time even years after the service.'" Elena put down her bag. The UFC had forwarded the contract details. They're introducing special regulations to the exhibition. Limited strikes, protective equipment required. Referee empowered to halt the action at the slightest suspicion. Chuck nodded. And Tick already turned down most of it. Says he won't play in a neutered version of the sport. He demands real stakes, real penalties. Of course he does. Elena watched. Her grandfather. You knew he'd say that, didn't you? Chuck smiled faintly. Predictability is weakness, Elena. Do you recall? She pulled out hand wraps and focus mitts and unzipped her bag. So what do we do here? We've got 20 days to train for a fighter who's knocked out 12 men in 15 fights. A fighter in his prime who has all the physical gifts. We don't train to compete with his strengths. Chuck said, starting to wrap his hands with seasoned ease. We prepare to expose his weaknesses, the ones that were the same that night in the arena. He battles for the wrong motives. Elena scowled. Granddad, forgive me. Philosophical points won't keep a right hook from landing. Chuck completed wrapping his hands and turned to look at her. Don the mitts. Let me demonstrate something. For an hour, Chuck worked with Elena in a sequence of drills, not generating power or speed, but timing and placement. His movements were economic, deliberate, never overreaching, never wasting a movement. Combat isn't about who's stronger or quicker, he told her in between combinations. It's about who owns the space between the distance, the timing. He slipped. Elena's mock punch, countering with a light touch to her ribs. See, I didn't require speed for that. I required patience. Elena nodded, catching on. You're going to counterfight him. I'm going to allow him to defeat himself. Doc Henry came in, medical bag in tow. He stood in the doorway until he walked over to them. Looking sharp, Chuck, he said, but I still have to check those vitals. Chuck nodded, resting while Doc Henry conducted his exam. Blood pressure, heart rate, reflexes. The doctor's face was impassive. Professional, well, Elena said when he was done. Physically, he's great for his age, but that's the operative phrase for his age. Doc Henry looked directly at Chuck. You've got the heart and lungs of a man 20 years younger. But bone density, reaction time, recovery capacity, these aren't in your favor. Chuck toweled off his face. I'm not planning to outmatch him physically, Henry. Then what's your strategy? Because from a medical standpoint, I'm concerned. The same strategy I've always used, Chuck replied. Patience, discipline, understanding. Doc Henry shook his head. Those are virtues, not tactics. In the right context, they're both. Meanwhile, across town at the UFC Performance Institute, Tick, the Ghost Maddox, was putting on a show. His training session had been open to select media cameras, capturing every explosive combination, every dynamic movement. Tyreek worked with 3 different sparring partners, rotating them every round, overwhelming each with his speed and power. Between rounds, he played to the cameras, flexing and joking. His team had set up special lighting to highlight his physique. His technique, everything amplified, everything performed. Tommy Cavanaugh watched from the corner, arms crossed. When the media portion concluded, he pulled Tick aside. You're showing off for the cameras instead of preparing properly, he said bluntly. Tick gulped water, barely listening. That's the game now, Tommy. Perception is reality. No, reality is reality, and the reality is you're fighting Chuck Norris in less than 3 weeks. You need to take this seriously. I am taking it seriously. I'm just not scared like you seem to be. Tommy's eyes narrowed. It's not fear, kid. It's respect. Something you could use more of. Respect is earned in the cage, Tick retorted. Not given out like participation trophies to guys who used to be relevant. That used to be relevant guy revolutionized martial arts in America. He fought when there were no big purses, no sponsorships, no Instagram followers. Tick toed off his face. Different era, easier competition. Tommy shook his head in frustration. You know what? Keep thinking that. But at least do me one favor. Watch some footage of his actual tournament fights, not the movies, the real competition. Why? So I can laugh at some grainy old videos of karate guys wearing pajamas, so you can see what you're really up against. The movies are choreographed. His tournament fights weren't. There's a reason he went undefeated for 6 years. Tick waved him off. Fine. Send the links to my phone. I'll look at them tonight. But that evening, instead of studying footage, Tick hosted a party at a high-end Las Vegas club. Surrounded by admirers, he recounted his version of the confrontation with Chuck, each telling more exaggerated than the last. The old man was shaking. He told a group of Instagram influencers. You couldn't see it on camera, but trust me, he was terrified. Probably went home and Googled my knockout reel. The crowd laughed, drinks flowing, music pulsing. No one noticed. Tommy slipped out early, a look of concern etched on his face. As dawn approached, Tick finally returned to his suite, slightly drunk and completely confident. On a whim, he picked up his phone and searched for Chuck Norris's tournament fights. He found a compilation video, grainy footage from the 1960s and early 70s. Chuck, young and intense, moving with lethal precision against opponents who seemed perpetually a step behind. No wasted motion, no flash, just clinical efficiency and focus. Tick watched for a few minutes before closing the video with a dismissive gesture. Different era, he muttered to himself. Prehistoric. But something about those old clips lingered in his mind as he drifted off to sleep. The calm in Chuck's eyes before each exchange, the absolute certainty, the control. The next morning at his private gym, Chuck worked with Elena on a different aspect of preparation, recovery, and energy conservation. Tick fights in bursts, Chuck explained. Explosive, high-energy combinations, spectacular to watch, devastating when they land, but they require tremendous output. Elena nodded. And output means eventual fatigue. Exactly. His style is designed for quick victories. When they don't come, the energy expenditure becomes a liability. They moved through drills focused on defensive positioning. Subtle weight shifts, minimal movements with maximum effect, nothing that would make highlight reels. Everything that would preserve energy and create frustration for an aggressive opponent. Doc Henry arrived with another visitor, Dana Reyes, the commentator. She stood respectfully at the door until Chuck invited her in. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said. I wanted to speak with you off the record. No cameras, no tail. Chuck waved toward a bench along the mat. What's your point, Dana? She sat, picking her words carefully. I've been reporting on combat sports for 15 years. I fought pro before that. I know the sport, the psychology, and I am worried about what this demonstration could give to you, but to martial arts culture. Win or lose, this event has a sense that it discredits all that you have held dear through your career. Chuck took her words into consideration. Tell me, Dana, when you were competing professionally, what was your goal? She paused for a moment. To prove myself, to better myself, to uphold the craft. And now, what do you perceive the goal for so many fighters today? Fame, wealth, social media followers? She sighed. The landscape has shifted. The landscape does. Shift, Chuck explained. But the fundamentals shouldn't. Honor, respect, humility, these aren't age-old ideas. They're eternal principles that transform martial arts into more than mere combat. Dana leaned in. So this has nothing to do with principles, with teaching Turk a lesson. It's about reminding all on Nano just tick what is important, what endures, and you believe getting into an octagon with him will do that. Chuck smiled lazily. Sometimes the lesson must be taught in a language that the learner speaks. Dana watched him for a full moment. You know, I've heard there's a rumor going on in the internet that you're going to fix the fight in order to allow him to win and teach him humility by victory. That would be the path of least resistance, Chuck said. But easier routes do not usually result in long-term change. So, you are going to win to defeat a champion at his physical best? Chuck stood up, back on the mat. I'm going to teach him the difference between winning a fight and knowing one. As the days went by, both men kept up their training. Tick with blinding speed and violence. Chuck with subdued determination. The difference in their methods could not have been more stark. Tick's training sessions were media events. He imported sparring partners, particularly selected to match Chuck's height and physique. Every session ended with Tick knocking them out, then emulating an old man's shuffle to the amusement of his entourage. "This is going to be the easiest payday of my career," he bragged to reporters. "Like taking candy from a grandpa." Tommy made persistent efforts to redirect him back to rigorous practice, but Tick's confidence had turned into arrogance. He brushed aside worries, defied tactical counsel, and still went on treating the upcoming exhibition as a surefire highlight reel. Chuck's preparation, on the other hand, was kept in private, step-by-step fashion. He practiced with Elena on discrete scenarios, angles, energy control. Doc Henry kept his condition under scrutiny every day, maintaining him within reasonable limits. There was no flash, no media, no declarations. Only the quiet restraint of a man who had lived by a code longer than his opponent had existed. 1 week prior to the event, the UFC conducted a final press conference. The difference between the two fighters had only become more pronounced. Tick showed up in a bespoke suit accompanied by an entourage, music blasting from handheld speakers. Chuck arrived alone in simple attire, nodding graciously into the room. As questions poured forth, Tick hogged the microphone with bombast and prophecy. "First-round knockout," he said. "Could possibly be the first minute if he comes at me aggressively," which, let's be honest, he won't. He pretended to walk with a cane as an old man, prompting laughter from some in the crowd. When it was Chuck's time, his answers were still measured, considered. "I'm not here to match his speed or his youth," he said flatly. "I'm here to meet a challenge and maybe offer some insight that only comes with experience," one reporter asked him. "But how do you plan on keeping up with someone who has such physical assets?" Chuck's answer was uncompromising. Combat isn't purely physical. It's spiritual, it's mental, it's emotional. The body delivers the punch, but the mind determines when, how, and why. Tyreek snorted into his microphone. "Say that to all the men I've put to sleep. Doubt their spiritual game was doing much good." As the press conference wrapped up, the customary face-off reunited them one final time before the fight. Tyreek loomed over Chuck, leaning down in mock sneer. Chuck looked him straight in the eye, not intimidated or hostile. "1 week, old man?" Tyreek mumbled between his teeth. "Get your medical insurance covered up." Chuck's face didn't change. "1 week," he concurred. "Plenty of time for thinking." "Thinking about what? About why you're really doing it." Something fluttered across Tick's fascia, flashing crack in the mask of total assurance. It vanished in an instant, replaced by his practice scowl, but not before Chuck saw it. As they parted ways, Elena walked, with her grandfather towards the exit. "He's becoming more outlandish with every appearance," she noted, as if he's trying to convince himself as much as the rest of us. Chuck nodded. "Fear tends to disguise itself as bravado. You think he's scared? I think he's starting to doubt. And that's step 1 in understanding." That evening in his hotel suite, Tick paced fitfully, unable to relax. Tommy watched him with increasing worry. "You should be resting," Tommy said, "saving your strength. You've got a week of preparation to go before the final cut." Tyreek kept on pacing. "I don't require resting. I require this fight to be over already. I'm sick of words. Then perhaps stop booking media appearances every 6 hours." Tick glared at him. "That's business. That's brand building. That's diversion," Tommy shot back. "And it's causing you to get sloppy. Your technique was wobbly in sparring today. You're telegraphing your combinations too much against Chuck Norris. I could telegraph via certified mail and still land." Tommy got to his feet. "Kid, I've been around 30 years. I've seen champions come and go. The ones who fall always share the same issue. They begin to believe their own hype." Tick ceased his pacing. This is not hype. This is reality. I'm the greatest fighter in the world. Possibly. But Chuck Norris is more than a fighter. He's something other. Sure, he's an old man. Tommy shook his head. He's patient. There is a difference. He spent a lifetime perfecting himself before attempting to perfect others. You're still on the first half. Tick flopped down onto the couch. All of a sudden, restless. Whatever, man. Philosophy doesn't fight. No, said Tommy in an agreeing whisper. But it may decide what winning is. In his much more humble lodging across town, Chuck sat in contemplation, eyes shut, breath regular. Elena sat at her laptop across from him, looking up every so often with a combination of concern and awe. The UFC just dispatched the last set of medical procedures. They told her they're adding additional personnel, high-end equipment. They're afraid. Chuck opened his eyes. They should be, but for reasons different than they imagine. The internet is rife with speculation. Half believe you're going to catch everybody off guard with some secret skill. The other half, she left it hanging. Think I'm going to get hurt, huh? Chuck filled in for her. That's to be expected. Doesn't it irk you? The disbelief, the scorn? Ah. Chuck pondered the question. Opinions are like weather. Elena, they come and go and don't amount to squat in your way if you know where you're headed. And where are you going with this? Somewhere. Tick needs to see. The week flew by. Final preparations, medical checks, promotional commitments. Through it all, the difference between the two men was glaring tie, becoming increasingly bombastic with each outing. Chuck holding fast to his calm consistency. The evening before the event, Doc Henry conducted a final checkup on Chuck's health. Physically, you're as ready as you can be, he determined, storing his gear. But I'd be negligent as your doctor and friend if I did not make one final appeal to you to rethink this. Chuck grinned. Your concern registered, Henry, but some paths once taken must be finished. Doc Henry nodded unwillingly. Then recall what we said. Conservation of energy, limited contact, planned interaction, I recall. As Doc Henry departed, Elena sat next to her grandfather. Get some rest, she said. Tomorrow's going to be tough. Chuck regarded her. Do you get it now why I took this challenge? She reflected for a moment. I think so. It's not winning or losing a bout. It's maintaining something that's being lost, the essence behind the technique. Chuck nodded. There's hope for the next generation after all. Across town, Tyrek lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his luxury suite. For the first time in weeks, he was alone in no entourage. No cameras, no audience, just the quiet and his thoughts. Almost unconsciously, he reached for his phone and pulled up footage of Chuck's old tournament fights again. He watched longer, this time studying the precise movements, the economical footwork, the calm between exchanges. Something about it bothered him, though he couldn't articulate what. He closed the video and tried to sleep, but rest came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of fighting an opponent whose face kept changing. Sometimes Chuck as a young man, sometimes Chuck as he was now, sometimes a mirror image of himself. Tomorrow had arrived. The moment of truth was at hand, and neither man could turn back. The U-Mobile arena pulsed with anticipation. Every seat filled. A sea of faces illuminated by the glow of the central octagon. Camera flashes peppered the darkness like lightning, capturing the moment from every angle. This wasn't just an exhibition. It was an event, a collision of eras playing out before a global audience. Dana Reyes adjusted her headset in the commentary booth, surveying the scene below. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what may be the most unusual matchup in combat sports history. I'm Dana Reyes alongside Mike Goldberg for what can only be described as a generational showdown. Her co-commentator nodded. The energy in this arena is unlike anything I felt before. Dana, it's not just excitement. There's something almost reverential about it. Like everyone knows they're witnessing something that transcends the sport itself. Dana gestured to the divided crowd. And look at this audience, Mike. You've got the younger fans in Tyrik's corner wearing his merchandise chanting "Ghost, Ghost, Ghost." But then you've got this other demographic, older fans, martial artists, veterans, saw here for Chuck Norris. The respect in their eyes is palpable. The house lights dimmed suddenly, drawing all eyes to the entrance tunnel. Music erupted, a heavy pulsing beat with an aggressive bass line. Spotlights swirled as Tick, the ghost Maddox, emerged, arms raised, entourage flanking him like a royal procession. He moved down the walkway with practice swagger, playing to every camera, acknowledging his fans with exaggerated gestures. His fight shorts gleamed with sponsor logos, his team carrying banners, and equipment adorned with his personal branding. And here comes Tyrik Maddox. Dana narrated undefeated at 15-0-12 knockouts. Currently the most marketable fighter in the UFC and, according to his own assessment, the best combat athlete on the planet. Tick entered the octagon, bouncing on, his toes turning to face each section of the crowd with theatrical flourishes. He looked confident, almost casual, as if attending a public appearance rather than preparing for combat. The music faded, and a new anticipation gripped the arena. No entrance music replaced it, just expectant silence. Then, without fanfare, Chuck Norris appeared at the tunnel entrance, alone, except for Elena and Doc Henry walking slightly behind. Him. No entourage, no theatrics, just a steady walk toward destiny. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divided. Tick's younger fans offered scattered boos and taunts, but they were quickly drowned out by a rising chant from the other sections. Chuck, Chuck, Chuck. The legendary martial artist acknowledged the crowd with a simple nod, but maintained his focus. His fight attire was plain black shorts, no sponsor logos, no flash. He carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had nothing to prove but something important to demonstrate. And here comes Chuck Norris. Dana's voice had softened with clear respect. Six-time world karate champion, undefeated for 6 consecutive years during his competitive prime, and perhaps the most influential American martial artist of the 20th century. At 80 years old, he steps into the octagon not as a celebrity, but as a carrier of tradition. Chuck entered the cage with the same steady composure he had shown throughout the build-up. He moved to his corner where Elena helped him with final preparations. No pep talk, no last-minute instructions, just a supportive presence. Across the octagon, Tick performed for the cameras, shadowboxing and flexing. Tommy tried to focus him with quiet words, but Tick seemed more interested in playing to the audience than listening to counsel. The referee called both fighters to the center for final instructions. Standing face-to-face, the physical contrast was stark. Tick towered over Chuck, his body honed to physical perfection, muscles defined beneath his skin. Chuck stood relaxed, his frame still solid but bearing the inevitable markers of age. "Remember the modified rules," the referee instructed. 3 3-and-out rounds. Standard MMA scoring. I can and will stop the action at any sign of excess. Protect yourselves at all times. Touch gloves if you want. Tick extended his glove with a theatrical smirk. Chuck tapped it lightly, his expression unchanging. "Good luck, Grandpa," Tyrik said, loud enough for nearby cameras to pick up. "You're going to need it." Chuck remained silent, just going back to his corner. Dana leaned into her mic. And there's the last face-off before fight. The difference couldn't be more dramatic. Youth against experience. Flash against substance. Volume against silence. The men were in position. The crowd fell silent. The referee worked both men over one last time and stepped back. "Ready?" he asked Chuck, who nodded once. "Ready?" he asked Tyrik, who sprang hopefully. The referee cut his hand through the air. "Start." The bell rang, its echo barely fading before Tick burst forward. He came in hard, aggressive, firing. A combination of punches meant to overwhelm and intimidate. His movement was fluid, technical, the result of thousands of hours of training. Chuck didn't meet the charge. Instead, he moved slightly, creating angles, keeping distance. His movements were minimal, economical. He didn't try to match Tick's speed or power. He simply wasn't there when the strikes landed. Maddox comes out, looking to make a statement early. Aggressive, Dana said. But look at Norris' complete composure. Perfect positioning defensively. He's making Tick miss without spending much energy. Tick pressed forward, turning up the output, firing more combinations, introducing kicks into his attack. His face began to show frustration as Chuck continued to slip and evade, offering no counterattacks, simply maintaining defensive integrity. Maddox is throwing everything but the kitchen sink. Dana's co-commentator noted, but Chuck is demonstrating masterclass defensive movement. This isn't athleticism. It's positioning, timing, and reading your opponent. A minute into the round, Tick was able to pin Chuck to the cage. He threw a series of punches, some partially making contact. The audience gasped, then erupted as Tick grinned, at last delivering clean shots. "You feel that, old man?" he sneered between gasps. "That's real fighting." Chuck took the punches without apparent reaction, then performed a subtle pivot that generated just enough room to escape the cage. No desperation, no thrashing, just serene, honed technique. Amazing, Dana thought. Chuck takes a few punches but doesn't break stance or poise, and look how effectively he generates space. Minimum effort, maximum impact. As the round wore on, a pattern became apparent. Tick pushing forward with mounting desperation, Chuck defending with precise control. The younger fighter started breathing harder, his combinations less sharp as frustration built. Tick is spending an enormous amount of energy, Dana observed. His output is huge, but he hasn't connected with anything significant. Meanwhile, Chuck has yet to throw a single offensive punch. He's dictating pace and range to this fight through sheer defensive mastery. Tommy sat in his corner, concern growing on his face. "He's making you work too hard," he shouted. "Relax. Find your rhythm." But Tick couldn't settle. Every dodge by Chuck emboldened his will to land something conclusive. He pushed forward, again, unleashing a spinning kick that targeted Chuck's head. Chuck dodged it easily, and for the first time counter at a simple, straight punch to Tick's belly as he came off the kick. Not hard, but precisely timed and placed. Tick felt it more than he should have, his eyes widening momentarily in surprise. The bell sounded, round one done. In his corner, Tick gulped water, puffing. "He's not doing anything," he groused to Tommy, "just running and dodging." Tommy shook his head. "He's making you miss, making you work, forcing you to fight on his terms. Stop chasing and start thinking in the octagon." Chuck sat calmly while Elena went over him. "You good?" she asked softly. Chuck nodded. "He's strong, quick, but predictable. You took some shots, needed information." The bell for round two sounded. Tick came out more focused. His initial ire directed itself into determination. He came out more deliberately this time, cutting off the cage, forcing Chuck to fight rather than dodge. For the first time, Chuck started offering occasional, counter-simple, direct strikes executed with surgical precision. Nothing spectacular, nothing that would make highlight reels, but each landed with surprising efficiency, shattering Tick's rhythm. "Now we're seeing a shift," Dana noted. "Chuck isn't just defending, he's responding back. Not with power, but with precise timing. Each counter is like a teacher's correction, just enough to make a point." Tick's frustration started to rise again. He'd anticipated an easy win, a highlight reel knockout. Instead, he faced an opponent who would not engage on his terms, who made him work for each moment, who replied to his most dynamic techniques with simple, efficient counters. "Come on and fight!" Tick bellowed briefly, letting his hands fall in frustration. Chuck reacted faster than anyone could have anticipated. A three-strike sequence executed with the finesse of 60 years of experience. Not strong, but well-placed. The final strike landed Tyreek off-center, sending him stumbling backward. The people went wild. Chuck snapped right back into defensive stance, making no move to follow through or take advantage of the moment. Tyreek's eyes snapped with anger. He went forward, abandoning technique for brute force. Chuck fended off the ragged attacks, now and then striking back with a blow that looked meant not to damage, but to teach. "What we're seeing here isn't a fight," Dana remarked. Her voice softened with respect. "It's a bodily conversation. Tick communicates with force and strength. Chuck responds with precision and timing. 2 generations, 2 philosophies, spoken through the most basic medium of expression. As round 2 drew to a close, Tick at last found linkage with a good combination. Standing Chuck against the cage, the arena erupted as Tick drenched the pressure on, landing numerous pure shots. For an instant, worry crossed the faces of Elena and Doc Henry. But Chuck rode out the storm with the aplomb of a man who had endured a lot worse. No hysteria, no frantic countering, just stern defense until the bell. In his corner, Tick was ecstatic. "I've got him now," he said to Tommy. "He's taking those punches. 1 more round and he's finished." Tommy remained skeptical. "You scored." "Yes. But look at him. He's not hurt. He's not weary. He's in the right place. Where's the losing? It's not winning or losing for him. That's what you're missing." Throughout the octagon, Doc Henry examined Chuck closely. "You absorbed some hard blows there. Anything dizzy? Vision problems?" Chuck shook his head. "I'm all right, Henry." Elena examined her grandfather's face. "What's round 3 look like?" Chuck drank some. Water. Time for the lesson. The final round. The bell had rung. The arena was electric with anticipation. Tick emerged aggressive once more, emboldened by his solid finish to round 2. Something was different in Chuck's attitude, however. Slight, but not missing to those who knew what to see. No longer strictly defense. Every movement now had multi-purpose Sanino, not just staying out of damage, but creating accurate counters. His rhythm was planning ahead for Tick's attacks before they committed. "Something changed," Dana noted. "Chuck is no longer just responding. He's controlling the exchanges. Take a look at his stance. He's goading Tick into particular attacks." Tick threw a solid combination. Chuck dodged the first 2 punches, parried the third, and landed a clean counter that left Tyreek stunned for a moment. Not a knockout punch, just perfectly placed, precisely timed. Uncertainty was there for the first time on Tick's face. He had unleashed everything he had. And though he'd got some in, he hadn't overwhelmed as anticipated. Now this 80-year-old man wasn't merely hanging in, but firing back with skills that seemed to uncover gaps in his game he wasn't aware of. "Tired, kid?" Chuck asked softly, the first words out of his mouth in the octagon. Tick's eyes opened wide with shock, then snapped shut with fresh determination. He launched a flying knee, spectacular, powerful, meant to finish the fight in highlight reel style. Chuck sidestepped by inches, allowing the attack to sail harmlessly past. Chuck sent 3 precise punches shoulder solar plexus knee into the off-balance Tick as he staggered backward. The crowd went wild, many standing to their feet. This wasn't competitive. This was masterful. "Incredible!" Dana cried out. "Chuck Norris!" simply countered one of the UFC champion's signature moves with textbook perfection. It's not about athleticism. It's about mastery, about knowing the underlying principles of combat that don't relate to age or rule sets. Tyreek got back on his feet, a different emotion apparent on his face. You know, just anger or frustration, but confusion, doubt. For the first time, he was challenging his assumptions, his style, maybe even his definition of what fighting really was. Chuck felt the change. He advanced for the first time in the fight, not aggressively but with intent. Hands up, balance immaculate, eyes fixed on Tick with unblinking concentration. Tick retreated another first. He threw a frantic combination. But his technique had fallen away, his movements telegraphed by emotion rather than strategy. Chuck slipped the wild strikes and in one fluid sequence executed a perfect combination. Simple, direct, but delivered with the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime dedicated to martial arts. The final strike, a straight right hand connected cleanly to Tick's jaw. The champion's eyes glazed momentarily. His legs buckled. He dropped to one knee, catching himself before falling completely. The hall erupted in sound cheers, gasps, cries of astonishment. Chuck withdrew, taking no shot at follow-up. He just waited, palms still raised, face still unchanging. Tick looked up, eyes clearing, the truth of what had just occurred dawning on him. He had been taken down not by some dazzling technique, but by basic principles put into effect at the perfect moment. The referee stepped between them, examining Tick's state. "Good to keep going?" Pride pushed Tick onto his feet. "I'm fine," he protested, though his eyes betrayed him. The battle resumed, though something essential had shifted. Tick no longer launched himself with wild abandon. Chuck no longer concentrated on defense. They sparred in circles, exchanging fleeting blows, each eyeing the other with heightened acuteness. During the last 30 seconds, their eyes locked within a clinch. Something was communicated between them, not words, but comprehension. The bell tolled, and the exhibition was over. The crowd was on its feet, applause resonating through the arena, not for the display they had come to see, but for the lesson they had seen. Dana's voice boomed over the broadcast, heavy with emotion. "What we've just seen goes beyond winning and losing. This wasn't merely a battle. It was a lesson of what martial arts at its essence is really all about. Not flash, not control, but self-mastery before even trying to master others." In the middle of the octagon, Tick and Chuck hovered as the referee grasped their wrists, anticipating the verdict. But in that instant, the official outcome practically mattered not. Something else had already been determined. Sweat streamed down the face of Tyrick as he stood in the middle of the octagon, awaiting the official word. His breathing had settled, but his thoughts were a whirl. The fight hadn't worked out as he had mapped it out, not even close. He had connected shots. Yes, he had even dictated parts of the fight, but the script he'd written the easy win, the highlight reel knockout. The Baz's vindication of his time over the past had fallen apart with every passing minute. Chuck Norris stood alongside him, as calm as ever. His breathing was steady, his stance loose, but vigilant. If he was fatigued or injured, he gave no indication. His eyes were intently locked ahead, the eyes of a man who had stayed precisely who he was, irrespective of situation. The referee grasped both men's wrists, while the announcer's voice echoed throughout the arena. "We go to the judges' scorecards after 3 rounds in this special exhibition bout. Judge Rodriguez has the bout 29-28 in favor of Maddox, Judge Williams has it 29-28 in favor of Norris, and Judge Thompson scores it 29-29, a draw." The reaction of the crowd was confused murmurs, boos, mixed cheers. "We have a split draw, ladies and gentlemen." Dana Reyes moved into her microphone. Split draw, and quite honestly, that seems fitting. It wasn't about win or lose. It was about showing 2 styles of fighting, 2 philosophies, 2 generations. The referee let both fighters' wrists go. The traditional time had come when fighters hug, nod at each other, leave the fight in the past. Everyone stared, curious how Tick would navigate this moment of truth. The winner was frozen for a moment, trying to process not only the choice, but everything that had happened in the last 3 rounds. He had gone into the cage, confident of his superiority, his unbeatableness. He came out, wondering if he had known anything at all. Chuck was the first to offer his hand, a neutral gesture. Neither of victory nor superiority. Just polite, Tyrick hung back, pride struggling with the epiphany still occurring inside him. Then slowly he accepted the extended hand. The handshake was perfunctory, professional, but as they parted, something drove Tick to talk. "You could have killed me," he whispered. So only Chuck heard that right hand. You yanked it. Chuck looked at him. This wasn't about killing you. It was about beginning something. Beginning what? Your true education. Before Tick could say anything, Chuck spun around and headed for his corner where Elena sat with a towel and water. No victory dance, no crowd-pleasing, just the dignified silence that had characterized his performance all along. At the commentary table, Dana was struggling to keep her emotions in check. In 30 years of covering combat sports, I've never witnessed anything like this. Chuck Norris just taught a masterclass not only in combat technique, but in what it is to be a martial artist, control, precision, purpose behind every motion. Her co-commentator nodded. And the thing that's amazing is that he never attempted to counter Tick's strengths. He never attempted to be quicker or stronger. He just applied basic principles, styming, distance, economy, to counter those strengths. That's the point here, Dana went on. Real martial arts is not physical. It's about acquiring principles that don't wither away with age or shift with fads. Behind him, Tommy draped a towel over Tick's shoulders. You okay? He asked, scrutinizing his fighter's face. Tick nodded very slowly, but his face was altered. The arrogant grin replaced by something more contemplative, more reflective. He made me appear to be a beginner, he muttered. No, Tommy replied. He made you appear to have more to learn. There's a difference. On the other side of the octagon, Doc Henry examined Chuck's vital signs, while Elena dabbed sweat from her grandfather's forehead. Dizzy? Dizzy? Disoriented? Doc Henry inquired professionally. Chuck shook his head. I'm fine, Henry. You caught some tough shots in there. Much-needed lessons for us both. Elena observed her grandfather. You got what you wanted out of this? Chuck looked over the cage at Tick, who sat across from the mat, his usual entourage giving him room. That will depend on what is next. Post-fight interviews commenced. The UFC commentator came to Chuck first, microphone held out. Chuck Norris. At 80 years old, you just fought 3 rounds with the present UFC champion. Most people thought this was going to be a one-sided affair, but you held your own beautifully. What was your plan of attack going in? Chuck picked up the microphone with a nod of appreciation. There's an old saying in the martial arts, the more you sweat in practice, the less you bleed in battle. I've practiced for more than 60 years. That provides you with some insight that can't be learned quickly or from viewing videos. At any time, were you worried about physical disadvantage or age difference? Fighting isn't only physical, Chuck answered in a calm manner. It's spiritual, emotional, mental. The body acts, but the mind chooses. The heart commits. The spirit survives. And what would you tell those who denounce this exhibition as dangerous or inadmissible due to the age difference? Chuck smiled faintly. Danger is involved with growing up. Comfort is the nemesis of progress. The most valuable lessons may be obtained from the most unpleasant experiences. Any last words on your performance or the choice? The choice doesn't matter. Chuck just said, what's important is what we all take away from this experience, what we learn, how we grow. He returned the microphone and went back to his corner where Elena stood holding his jacket. The commentator made his way over to Tick, who now stood up from his stool. The champion was a different man. This customary swagger constrained, the look on his face thoughtful instead of victorious. Tick, you came into this show as the odds-on favorite. You threw some good shots, had some control of the action, but looked frustrated at times. What was it like in there with Chuck Norris? Tyreek spoke up, but for once didn't immediately dive into his practice bravado. He hesitated, carefully selecting his words. It was a learning experience, he finally said. I walked in, expecting this was going to be proving something, that my generation is better, faster, stronger, but that is not what occurred in there. What did occur in there? Tick glanced over the octagon at Chuck, who was sitting calmly talking to Doc Henry. I have knocked out 12 fighters. I have beaten champions. But in there with him, I fought a different type of fighter. Not stronger or quicker, but smarter. The crowd fell silent, surprised by this unprecedented introspection. He never had my fight, Tick went on. He forced me to have his. Every time I thought I'd caught him, he taught me a hole in my game I wasn't aware of. Not with fancy moves, but excellent fundamentals. So what's your take from this experience? Tick's eyes were still on Chuck that I've been doing everything wrong, winning the fights, receiving attention, creating my brand, but the true test isn't winning the opponent's seats, controlling yourself. He returned the microphone, leaving, the commentator clearly shocked by the change of heart. As the arena, his discipline, living the truths he had exhibited in the octagon. The media spotlight dispersed from him more rapidly, which was to his temperament. He had never fought for accolades. Elena perceived the subtle shift in her grandfather after the exhibition, not physical, but spiritual, a certain contentment, a sense of purpose served. You never doubted the outcome, did you? She asked him one night as they ate dinner. Even when everybody else thought you were playing too much at risk, Chuck weighed the question. I didn't care about outcomes. I cared about process, about being present in each moment. But you knew he would learn the lesson. I knew there was a lesson to be learned. Whether he understood it, it was up to him. Elena smiled. Well, what I've observed of his training videos recently, I'd say he's understanding it pretty well. He has potential beyond what he's demonstrated, beyond what he thought of himself. Because of you, Chuck shook his head, because he was at last willing to see it himself. 2 months after the exhibition, the UFC announced Tyreek's next title defense. The pre-fight press conference unveiled a champion overhauled. Still confident, still certain of his skills, but with an underlying humility previously notable absent. When queried over the change in his bearing, Tick responded reflectively, I used to believe fighting was about dominating other people. Now I get it's about controlling yourself, about being better today than yesterday. A journalist asked a follow-up. And what about your training with Chuck Norris? Is that ongoing? Twice a week, Tick confirmed. The basics never expire. They just become more profound. Did it impact your preparation for this title defense? Tick nodded. I'm a better rounded fighter now, more effective. I expend less energy on unimportant things in training and in life. When the bout arrived, the difference was obvious to anyone who knew Tick's earlier style. The flash existed still, the athleticism undeniable, but now there was something more a composure, a precision, a strategic patience that raised his performance. Above mere physical dominion, he defeated the man in the 4th round by submission, not with brute power, but with technical finesse and impeccable timing. When the referee put up his hand, Tick's celebration was decidedly subdued. No showboating, no bad-mouthing, just the contented nod of satisfaction at a job well executed. During his post-fight interview, he attributed it to his development. I want to thank my coaches Tommy Cavanaugh, who's been with me from day one, and Chuck Norris, who showed me that true strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how well you control yourself when hitting isn't the answer. The camera cut to Chuck, seated quietly at ringside, acknowledging the mention with a simple nod. A few months later, Chuck was invited to the opening of Tick's brand new training center in his native Detroit. Not a gaudy fight gym with his name in neon lights, but a neighborhood dojo to teach at-risk youth the values of martial arts, discipline, respect, and perseverance. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Tick addressed the crowd of teen and community members. When I began boxing, I believed it was all about being the toughest, the loudest, the person everyone feared or envied. I was mistaken. He pointed to Chuck, who was standing in close proximity. This man showed me that true strength isn't determined by knockouts or championships or Instagram followers. It's quantified in terms of impact, by the number of lives that you enhance, how much wisdom you impart, how well you live the principles that you proclaim to uphold. When Chuck moved forward to cut the ribbon with Tick, cameras recorded the event, not merely the action, but the intention behind it. The torch was not passed or received. It was passed over, its fire igniting a new one without putting out the previous one. Throughout the months and years that passed, the two men went on their own ways. Chuck as the living definition of enduring tradition, Tick as the nexus between that tradition and the changing world of fighting sports. The show that had started out as spectacle had evolved into legacy, not the legacy of who won and lost on one night, but the lasting legacy of values that stretch across generations. Respect gained, not demanded. Strongness quantifiable in character, not conquest. Wisdom appreciated along with innovation. One night following a training session with promising students at the Detroit Center, Tick and Chuck sat together observing the next generation work their forms. "I've been thinking a lot about our struggle," Tick said. "About what you explained to me later, that it wasn't about ending me, but beginning something." Chuck nodded, his gaze on the students, and has it. Tick glanced around the dojo, the fresh young, faces intent on their training at the walls that were not hung with his championship belts, but with values printed in both English and Korean: integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit. "It began something greater than I could have dreamed," he conceded, "something which may survive any title or record. That quietly is the real victory measure." As evening fell outside, the practice sounds throbbed within the dojoth rhythm of discipline, cadence of growth, harmony of respect. Not the cheer of the crowd or the rush of fleeting fame, but something more, something steadier, something longer lasting, the echo that remains. Next, we have two more great stories waiting for you. Just click on the pic you'd like to view, and it will transport you there. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a great deal.